Well, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Ariel Bar Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com. We are presently going to have Lesson 9 in our series, which I've entitled Kabbalah 101 Plus. Specifically, the basics of Kabbalah that your other rabbis aren't going to teach you about. You know, for those of you who are familiar with the KosherTorah School, we've been around for a long, long time. We originally started, believe it or not, in 1992. It might have been before some of you all born. We've been around for a long time. And as everything, we've grown, matured, evolved. When I began teaching, we organized, remember our original name was Yeshivat B'nai Nevi'im, to be an outreach organization, a kiruv organization, just like everybody else, using what is permissible of the Kabbalah to teach publicly as a ways and a means to outreach, to bring people back to Torah Judaism. That was our original intent way back when, and boy, oh boy, have we grown since then. We have been honored to have served a great global audience after all these years, and have our books published and stuff. Our website, KosherTorah.com, believe it or not, we began that in 1997. Yippee-ki-yay. Now, the reason why I'm telling you all of this in relationship to our present course is this. Up until now, I've taught you all the other original, and I might add authentic schools of Kabbalah. And now we're going to make a turn. We're going to make a shift. And we're going to discuss what I've entitled as the public's Kabbalah. The Kabbalah that everybody knows about, as opposed to what everyone doesn't know about. It's interesting. A little history of mine. When I first went to Israel, it was in the spring of 1979. And at the time when I went to the local Jewish bookstore, there might have been, and this is in Hebrew, 2, 3, 4, or 5 books of Kabbalah readily available. Sidur Rashash, Ramak, some Kitvei Ari, and the like. And it was pretty slim pickings even back then. And this is again in the Sefer Kodesh stores in Israel. In English, the only real things that existed about Kabbalah were the Simon Sperling 5-volume Zohar, which is published, I think, back in the 1930s, and works of Gershom Scholem. That was it. Well, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, for those of you who might remember him, back in the 70s and 80s, wrote a number of very nice academic texts with Kabbalah. They were so controversial in the Jewish community that no Jewish publisher was willing to publish them. By the way, these are in the days BA, before Art Scroll that I'm talking. So, Kaplan had to turn to a secular Jewish publisher of the occult, Samuel Weiser, who at the time was in New York before I think he moved up to Maine. And he published Kaplan's original Kabbalistic works, Meditation in Kabbalah, Meditation in the Bible, and the like. And they were just, at the time, too hot to handle for the traditional Orthodox community, which at the time was radically rationalist. So much so that even movements like Lubavitch certainly were only a fraction of the strength that they are today, and Breslov's practically non-existent. What we would call mystical studies were frowned upon as being not really part of Judaism. And that's just the way it was. I'm talking again, 1979 to 1980, especially in the English-speaking world. My, how things have changed. We're talking now 40 years ago. Today, you will find books of Kabbalah everywhere. You can go into Hebrew bookstores in Israel or even in the United States. One of the best Hebrew bookstores that everybody in the frum religious world knows is Biegeleisen's on 16th Avenue in Borough Park, Brooklyn. When you go in, you look at his Kabbalah, so he's got, hundreds of titles. Makor HaSfarim, my old friends on Coney Island Avenue in Flatbush, hundreds of titles. Everybody now, Kabbalah is the vogue. And it's not because of the groups. I'll be polite. You have a lot of Kabbalah groups out there, which many will call cults. I obviously will never, ever refer negatively to any group in public. But you have a lot of these groups out there who made Kabbalah very popular, or let me rephrase that, their version of Kabbalah very popular. And I emphasize their version. And they came into loggerheads with the traditional rabbinic community, forcing the traditional rabbinic community to respond. And that led to pretty much every, as we would say, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, or Tom, Dick, and Harry, starting to pick up books of Kabbalah so as to have some insights. And to this day, now all these years later, when you can read in art scroll books, whether it be on a Chumash or even Gemara, you'll find an occasional reference to Kabbalistic ideas and concepts. That wasn't there 40 years ago, I guarantee you that. So call it evolution, progress. And we've been there all this time. And what I've endeavored to contribute, I'm honored that has been warmly received. But I might add, I'm going to tell you something very disappointing that I just found out yesterday. Not everybody who studies Kabbalah is worthy of it. Not everybody who endeavors to get involved with Kabbalistic studies does the right thing. Every now and then, I go on to places like Amazon.com, and I look for whatever new books are out there. And I discovered that something that I translated many, many years ago, published in Walking in the Fire in 2007, originally from my Sefer Segulot from years earlier, the Goralot Achi Tofel. I noticed that there was a new version of it in English. And I said, oh, somebody must have gotten the original Hebrew and translated it independently and published it. I would love to see what they did. So I went and I looked up the book. And to my shock and surprise, the introduction looked awfully familiar. You know what I'm getting at? They stole my stuff. Outright, verbatim, plagiarized my entire stuff. Word for word, they took it out of my book and published under their name. And they don't have the name of who published it. It's out there. I contacted Amazon. Amazon just ignored me. So where we're going to go with this, I don't know. But it's, I don't know, you could say, well, flattery is a great form. What was it? Imitation something is a form of flattery. Well, yeah, not when it comes to lying and cheating in business. It doesn't. But over the years, you'd be surprised if I told you who my students have been. Both in political arenas, military arenas, religious arenas, because I do teach the, in quote, other stuff. And people recognize the value of the, in quote, other stuff. So, when my first book, Call Upon My Name, came out, people recognized that I'm teaching from the beginning all the, in quote, other stuff. Everyone else has been teaching Kabbalah as a metaphysical philosophy. And everybody learns it and goes, ooh, wow, that's so cool, that's so deep, that's so intense. And I sit there and I listen to all these public teachers. I said, tell me, they're talking about the Sephiroth, What's a Sephirah? Well, it's an emanation of God. There are 10 of them. The name's Keter. What the heck is an emanation of God? What are you talking about? basic concepts people do not understand. In my private class last week to our KosherTorah School student body, I talked about the 10 Sefirot. We're going to talk about these right now. And let me show you something. This is a diagram of the 10 Sefirot. I'm sure you've all seen it. You all know what it looks like. Okay? This is the form of the 10 Sefirot that is written in what we call the later Kabbalah, or what I've come to call the public's Kabbalah. Because interestingly, way back in the 1200s, once the Zohar started to disseminate, well, it was only in the hands of the secret societies of holy Kabbalists, and no one in the Jewish world knew about it. Right? Yeah, right. No, wrong. Kabbalah study amongst the laymen, even way back in the 1600s, was a very popular thing. How do you think the debacle of a movement like the Shabtai Tzvi in the 1600s could have happened, where thousands and tens of thousands of people were deceived by a false Kabbalistic Messiah? It's because everybody knew about this stuff. Kabbalah was as popular then as it is today. We went through a period in which it was more rationalist and theoretical and philosophical. But when you look at the original Kabbalah, okay? Now here, I'm going to show you this again. Here are the Sephiroth. Now, I know that the cameras are reversed and stuff like that, but just take a look at the diagram. Hopefully it's in the right order here. And if you look at it, for those of you who follow me on Facebook and are listening to me live, you notice I put a little question on Facebook. And I said, are Sephiroth inside us or outside of us? And I saw all the pithy little answers. Everybody said, oh, they're both and this and that. And I said, no, they're not. You don't understand Sephiroth yet. Here's the diagram of the Sephiroth. As we know, okay, Keter, top, the Chokhmah is on the right brain, Bina is on the left brain. And if you look at the diagram, let me see if I can do this on camera. If I look at the diagram here, okay, I'm pointed to Chokhmah, which is the right, even though on the camera it looks like it's the left. And this is my right hand, and this is the right column. This is the left column. Left hand, left column. Right hand, right column. Makes sense, no? So if I were to take this diagram of the Sephiroth, and I'm looking at it, here's the question. Am I looking at it like this, from the front or the back? Do you understand the question? When I look at the diagram of the Sephiroth, again, right hand, left hand. I know on the camera it's reversed, sorry. The right hand, Chokhmah is here. Left hand, Bina's there. Am I looking at them from the outside, or am I looking at them from the inside? The right column is always put on the right side. The left column is always put on the left side. And the only way you can have the right column on the right side and the left column on the left side is if it's inside you. Because if it's opposite you, then if you're facing me, then your right is on my left, and your left is on my right, because you're opposite, like that. But if you're inside, it's the same. Most people never pay attention to how the diagram of the 10 Sefirot are written, to recognize this internal structure, and therefore consider the Sefirot to be external. Let me read to you. I print this out because it's just a lot easier than reading it from the book. Here it is. This is a quote from the Baal Shem Tov. Now remember, our course is not a course in history. So don't worry that I'm jumping back and forth over hundreds of years, whatever, from one teacher to the next. We're here to teach what this is all about, regardless of where it comes from. But in the lessons to follow, we're going to discuss now the public Kabbalah. We're going to talk about the Sephiroth, the Partsufim, and all the language that came from the Zoharic schools and forward, so as to put everything into a proper context, again, with emphasis on the prophetic system. These are the words ascribed to the Baal Shem Tov. It is Sefer Baal Shem Tov, Parshat Va'et Hanan, comment 68. I'll read to you all the Hebrew, and then I'll translate. Pam achad haya harav, Baal Shem Tov, mochiach le'edam achad, al ma shediber b'Kabbalah berabim. V'hashiv lo ish, mipnei mamor, gam ken doresh b'Kabbalah berabim. V'hashiv lo harav, אני לומד את העולם שאבינו, שבעולם הזה ובאדם גם כן שייכים כל הדברים שנאמרו בספר עץ חיים, ולא שאני נותן להבין את רוחני שכתב בעץ חיים, אלא אבל מר דורש כל הדברים ככתבן בספר עץ חיים, ואם כן, אתה עושה מרוחניות גשמיות, שאין הפה יכול לדבר למעלה בעולם הרוחני. Translation. One time, the Baal Shem Tov came to a man who was teaching Kabbalah publicly and told the man that it is forbidden for him to teach Kabbalah. And the man says, why would you forbid me to teach Kabbalah publicly when you do the same? And the Baal Shem Tov responded, when I teach Kabbalah, I teach people that they should recognize and understand that all the things spoken about in the Etz Chaim and all that are applicable to this world and us. And they are not to be understood literally. All right? But you teach them as the katavan, like as if they were written, like literal. All right? Because you're making the spiritual to be like literal. And the mouth is not able to speak about the supernal worlds. Or, in other words, the Baal Shem Tov made it very clear, you're not getting the Kabbalah if you think it's just like it's written in the books. I know a lot of people today, because of the proliferation of Kabbalah books now, right? Like I said, back 1979, 1980 was next to nothing. Now, as opposed to having a drought, now we have a flood. And the vast majority of the stuff out there are written by unqualified people. And it's very frustrating because this is what the public is drawn to. Because most of these people have that fancy, classy stuff, that big advertising campaigns, they have a lot of money to back them. And they really push to get the stuff out there. And it reminds me of the blind leading the blind. But at the same time, I don't want to sound overwhelmingly negative for one reason. Everybody, everything's got its place, everything has got its time. And I guess that it meets the needs of individuals who are where they are and where they need to be. So I'm not going to be negative in that respect, other than to just make the comment that that's not where it's at. This is the point that the Baal Shem Tov made and why he made such a splash in his day. Remember, Hasidism today is a philosophical system. For those of you, the two big popular schools, of course, are Lubavitch and Breslov. And there's a heck of a lot more to Lubavitch than just the Tanya. There's the Likutei Torah. There's the Ayin Bet, the Samech Tet, Ayin Beis. The big books that the Rabbi Balatanya Shneur Zalman wrote. Long, oh my goodness, so long stuff. It's too long. And it's all philosophical. It's all really deep metaphysical philosophy, which a lot of people that's what they're into. In our Western secular society, which we have an overwhelming prejudice, just like, anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews. We have a world, believe it or not, which is anti-psychism, against any kind of real psychic development. Talk about psychic development in most academic circles today, and they'll look at you like, oh, please, you don't believe that New Age woo-woo crap. Whereas there's such overwhelming scientific evidence of its validity That's well documented all over the place. Telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing, all of this is science now. At one time in religion, we called it Ruach HaKodesh. But we're realizing now, like Rambam wrote, it's just the natural evolution of humanity. And surprisingly, it's all here in the Sephiroth. We're going to talk about these Sephiroth. And, okay. I got another diagram here that I'm going to show you in just a minute. Because remember I was talking about all this nonsense that's out there? Well, since I guess the days of the 1200s, you had numerous people throughout Europe. Remember, a lot of these people who were Christians, or Muslims for that matter, in the Middle East, they were very much also involved with or interested in what I guess we could call metaphysics. Others would call it the occult. And when they caught wind of the rabbis having this material, all of a sudden all these supposed anti-Semitic European and Muslim leaders became chummy, buddy. With all the rabbis saying, oh, I hear you got some good stuff there. And a lot of these European, Christian, and Middle Eastern Muslim leaders all had secret rabbis teaching them Kabbalah, which in all due respects, nothing new under the sun. We know from the Mishnah and the Gemara that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid taught Marcus Aurelius many things before he ascended to become the emperor. And if you ever read the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, which is rarely available today, you can see echoes of the teachings of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi in his works. So this is nothing new. Rabbis are proud and privileged to take people from around the world and teach them the real stuff. However, sometimes that stuff got translated into Greek and Latin. Of course, it fell into the hands of a very, very zealous church, who then, of course, wanted to interpret and make everything validate their own views. So they loved the Kabbalah, because they can now talk about the Kabbalah of the Trinity and all these different things. And they developed a Christian Kabbalah. And the Christian Kabbalah eventually evolved into the occultic Kabbalah. And the occultic Kabbalah developed into modern-day occultic and magical schools, the likes of which you will still see in people like Aleister Crowley and even the Satanic Church. They take all kinds of weirdo stuff. And we got to, as we say, mavdil ben kodesh lechol, separate between the sacred and the profane. Because when I see people who are completely unaware of our spiritual traditions in Torah, especially amongst many of the evangelical crowds, evangelical Christians who are sincere, honest, God-fearing, Bible-loving friends of Israel, and they look at this Kabbalah stuff, they're not looking at it from Aryeh Kaplan or me. They look at it from all this weirdo stuff that's out there on the internet, and they say, oh my God, it's satanic. And therefore, they think all of Kabbalah is satanic. And as we say, they throw out the baby with the bathwater. I've always responded to my evangelical Christian friends, and yes, I am proud and honored to have evangelical Christians as friends. And I said, look, you know how people pervert the Bible. So don't be surprised if they pervert Judaism. The same people who are perverters are perverters. And that's just the way it is. They understand that too. But getting back to this understanding of the internalization, let's talk Sephiroth specifically. And this is going to be an ongoing kind of thing over a number of different classes. The concept or idea of, or let me rephrase that, the word Sephiroth, as we've discussed, had its origins in the Sefer Yetzirah, where in which you had 10 Sefirot and the 22 letters. Those are the 32 wondrous paths. And as I made clear in my, I think it was my 2017 course on Sefer Yetzirah, where we covered specifically the first chapter from, I guess, the naturalist point of view, the pre-Soharic view, where in which the Sefirot were not looked at, in quote, divine emanations of God, but as others' stuff. What? Go take the course, you find out. So how did all of these Sefirot then get their names and their relationships and all this? This is what developed in Provence and Spain. This was developed and eventually came out of the Zoharic schools. So rather than go into the history, I'm not interested in going into a history of the Zohar and all that stuff. You want that? Daniel Matt is an excellent scholar of the Zohar. And I think he has even live classes somewhere on the internet. I think on Facebook maybe. And I mean, he did the whole Pritzker edition of the Zohar. It's a very great scholarly accomplishment. Rabbi Matt, I think he's a conservative rabbi. I don't know if he's a meditator, even though I know him, whatever, I'm not going to get into family stuff with him. But he, a brilliant scholar. His work is 100, it doesn't need my endorsement, his work speaks for itself. If you ever want to academically study the Zohar, he's your man. But with that being said, the Sephiroth developed and evolved, as we call them, the divine emanations. One thing I'm planning to do, in the Tikkunei Zohar, in the introduction, is found a very famous prayer called the Patach Eliyahu, the opening of Eliyahu. I've taught this many times before, translated it in Walking in the Fire. I'll tip it up here. Walking in the Fire. And we're going to review it, because the Patach Eliyahu, if anything, is more like a Kabbalistic Pledge of Allegiance, as well as some of the teachings of the Ben Ish Chai. But we'll get into those later in the course. Now, the Sefirot as levels of divine manifestation bridge the gap between the absolute unknowable God, who is called by Chaim Vital the Ein Sof, down to our physical structure and world of Malchut. Now, Rabbi Chaim innovated a lot in what we call the Kitvei Ari, which is radically different from everything before it. The best source that sums up, if you will, Zoharic pre-Lurianic Kabbalah would be Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who was in the same synagogue at the same time as the Ari and was the original teacher of Chaim Vital. His greatest work is, of course, called the Pardes Rimonim, the Garden of Pomegranates. I know it's been translated in French, but I've not yet seen it in English. It is an encyclopedia of ideas and beliefs, and it's a wonderful resource of information. It even includes the Abalafia system and his work on the on the holy names and the like. So the Sefirot concept that we're going to discuss now is more Cordoverian than it is Lurianic. And again, the Sefirot divine emanations. Where did the concept of the need for divine emanations come from? Yes, you can trace this back to Neoplatonic sources. Really, Plato, the Greek, all right? You can place it, the Plotinus, Pliny, and others. The history of the concepts are, in my opinion, well documented. Now, if you are a fundamentalist, you'll say, well, the Greeks learned it from us. It reminds me of the old joke that the old Soviet Russians would say, yeah, we invented everything. We invented even salt and air. We invented everything. Okay, good. Whatever. But the point is, a system developed out of these rabbis, the Provence and the Spanish system, and there was a whole bunch of other systems going on at the time that generated the Iyun books, the Bahir, Mayan Chochmah, and others. I've discussed these and written about these in other places. If I find them relevant, I will bring them up in the course here. But the system here that we're going to cover now is the basic standard model. The model of the Sefer Yetzirah was adopted, and the 10 Sefirot were therefore placed with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, with all the paths written herein. Again, this is a document. If you're watching this on camera and you want, you can pause it, I guess, and just take this and stuff like that. If I can, maybe I'll upload this on my YouTube page where the recording of this video will be, And I'll see if I can put like a JPEG access so you can get this. But again, you'll notice here, right column, left column, and take a quick look. You'll notice that the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are aligned in specific order with all the different paths, with only a single path going from Yesod to Malchut. Yesod is called the male, Malchut is called the female, the union of the monogamy of what we call the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah. That is what we call the kosher Sephiroth. Now, I've taught about this before. This is a different pattern. These are the Sephiroth of what we call the dark side, the Tum'ah. You'll notice that the letters along the paths are in completely different order, and the right column does not connect to the left column or the left to the right at the higher level, and they draw down paths to Malchut other than from her husband. So Malchut's got a whole bunch of boyfriends on the right and the left other than her husband. Whenever you see this diagram, know that this is the Tum'ah diagram from the unkosher Kabbalah. If you were to use these letters in this order, the Sephiroth, to try to create a golem, you would probably create a monstrosity rather than something holy. This diagram is very, very popular today. You'll find it all over the internet. You'll find it in Golden Dawn stuff, Crowley stuff, and even amongst a number of, in quote, Kabbalah books by people otherwise well-meaning. And in that respect, it's caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. You got to know the difference between what's real and what's not. Now, here's the problem. You see, if you're dealing with this stuff philosophically, then you're not being able to test it. Say, for example, let's talk cars. Which is a better car, the Ford Mustang or the Chevy Camaro? We might not even know what a Mustang or a Camaro is, so we're going to sit and debate and argue ideas back and forth. That's not going to decide. The way that we're going to decide is we're going to take a Ford Mustang for a drive. We're going to take a Chevy Camaro down the drive, and we'll drag them down the race car, and we'll see. In other words, if it's not real, then it's just not. When it comes to understanding Sephiroth, you can read 101 books on them and still not get it. I want you to know that this original path was not just Neoplatonic philosophy. I think it was much more than that to those who understood it. The Baal Shem Tov certainly understood this. So did Chaim Vital. And it's based upon their system that I'm going to talk to you about the Sephiroth tonight. I'm not going to explain basic stuff that I expect you. If you're listening to a KosherTorah lesson at this level already, I expect you to know certain things. So I'm not going to give you baby steps. Somebody's asking a question. What's the point of creating a golem? Just because one can? There are sometimes needs that you need a tulpa. Tulpa is what the Tibetan Buddhists would call a golem, and it actually explains how it's made rather than the myth of thinking that you just take some dirt, make a little clay model, and then say, hocus pocus on it and turn it to life. If that could happen, oh my goodness, I can imagine what all dirty-minded people out there would do. Sephiroth. When Rabbi Chaim Vital elaborates on his insights in the Etz Chaim and the Otzrot Chaim, where of course we have numerous courses on all this material available on our course page, KosherTorah.com. And you got to ask the question, where did he get this stuff from? Where did these original guys who developed this stuff get their stuff from? Well, it's Kabbalah, who was passed down from... Okay, you know what? When you say passed down from, yeah, there are things which we call Masorah, which is passing down, and that makes it real, authentic Kabbalah. And we have a history that of documented structures of these things. Like you read in Pirkei Avot, right? Moshe received the Torah, gave it to Yoshua, Yoshua passed it on, etc., and so on. So we have the lineage of rabbis, both in Babylon and Eretz Israel and the like. So we know a lot of stuff. But when it comes to these kinds of ideas, you'll find this especially with Rabbi Chaim Vital, that it's prominently proclaimed that this material came from Eliyahu Hanavi. Well, that's an impeachable source now, isn't it? Well, yes, it is. When did Eliyahu give it to Reb Chaim or reveal it to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave, as it's written in Zohar? Do we have any actual Masorah or evidence to verify or validate this? No. It's our faith. It's what we believe. And I've been considered heretical to even question or challenge it, so I'm not going to anger my peers by rocking their boats. But it shows that it has no historical continuity. And that is what's important to understand. So when the Sephiroth were developed, Keter, Chochmah, Bina, Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, we find references to biblical verses which associate these words, and they became attributed to the idea of the Sephiroth. With all of this being said, what is it all about? Now, you want to wax a little Neoplatonic and ask the great question, how could the great unseen, unknowable God even have any concept and context, there's certainly connection, with the lowliest of this lowly world in which we live in now? That's actually a rather trick question. Who's to say God is so high and sublime and unknown? Who's to say that our world is so lowly and disgusting and whatever? Well, that's that Platonic influence, the Stoic concept, the Stoics, all right? This wasn't an original Hebraic idea at all. No such thing. You see, in Christianity, they have the foundational doctrine, as you know, that God and man are completely separate from one another due to the sin in the Garden of Eden. And the only way to bridge that irreparable gap is, of course, with, sacrifice, Yeshu, and all the rest. And if you do not bridge that gap, then you are always and forever disconnected from God, and you need to be saved from that state of disconnect. Sorry, there's not a shred of that in our Jewish tradition at all, period. Yeah, there was a sin in the Garden of Eden. Oops. We got kicked out of the garden. Oops. Did it have a psychic effect on us? Yes. Oops. Are we disconnected from God? What are you talking about? Doesn't the Bible say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole Melokol Haaretz, the whole land is full of his kavod, his glory, right? Of course we're connected with God. We're not disconnected at all. The Christian concept of the need for salvation does not exist in Judaism. So when a Christian missionary says, well, how are you going to be saved? I say, saved from what? Hell. My Bible doesn't talk about anything called hell. And I've challenged many Christians. I say, okay, show me in the Jewish Bible where is it mention of hell? Well, it's a Sheol. Well, Sheol's not hell. There's a big difference. And a little bit of scholarship goes a long way to address these issues. But when Reb Chaim talked about the Sephiroth, as did the Baal Shem Tov, what I quoted to you, he says, you got to look at this internally. When Reb Chaim, who was very clearly a practitioner of the prophetic school that we've been talking about, how do we know? Go look at his Shari Kedusha. When he published the work, it had 4 sections. The 4th section, quoting the Abulafian system, was considered so controversial, the publisher refused to publish it. And if you go back over hundreds of years of printings of the Shari Kedusha, you'll see the little section says, part 4, we're not going to deal with it, we're not going to publish it, we consider it too holy. And it was only in the 1990s that it was published for the first time. And since then, it's been published numerous times. And of course, we teach it here. I have courses online. We're doing a present course for our private school students right now. Okay. Now, when Reb Chaim received these teachings of the emanations of the worlds, he says he learned it from Isaac Luria. Didn't learn it from Moshe Cordovero. And remember, Reb Chaim is Sheol and Hell. No, Sheol and Hell are totally different things. Go, look this stuff up. Now, I'm not going to get into that right now. But anyway, when Reb Chaim learned a year and a half, and only a year and a half with the Ari, and after the Ari passed, Reb Chaim says that the Ari would come to him in dreams at night or in visions by day. Now, was this really the actual soul of Yitzhak Luria, the Arizal, or was it an archetypal personification in Reb Chaim's mind? Don't know. They actually might be one and the same. But this is why we say Reb Chaim received all of this from Eliyahu Navi. It was internal, and it was brand new and unique revelation. That was his message. And that's why the Sephiroth are portrayed as being internal to us. Because when Reb Chaim gazed up, the highest he could see was the limit of human conscious conception. Remember what God said to Moses way back when? He goes up and says, let me see your glory. God says, no man can see my face and live. Why? Is God's face like so, ugly? You're going to drop dead looking at it? Is God's face so wonderful and glorious? You go, oh! No. It's just that concept and perception of reality, I don't even want to call it the divine, reality, is so far beyond our human context that we can't construct any form of idea to conceive it. The highest we can go is portrayed here in these 10 Sefirot. This is our personal internal pattern. And we gaze upon reality, that means all the universe, within the concept and construct of this form. So from our human point of view, this is the construct of reality. Now, okay, when we talk about what we call human, we make the terrible mistake of thinking human is Homo sapien sapien, physical flesh and blood human being. When Reb Chaim and all the other later Kabbalists say that the universe is in the form of a giant man, like Adam Kadmon, supernal man, we get the idea that the whole universe is in the shape of some big guy who's 6 foot, 6 billion trillion light years tall. He's got 10 fingers and 2 arms and his face like that. The universe looks like a human being. Okay, fantasy's got to come to an end. What the Kabbalists call human is this supernal pattern, which presently resides on earth in us, because we and our souls came to earth. We took on the form of these Homo sapien sapien bodies, therefore evolving and elevating them. The whole concept of a Darwinian evolution does not necessarily have to contradict the Torah at all. We all know that there was pre-Adamics, and then somehow what we call the Adamic soul came into the bloodline and elevated everything right away. So notice that this Adamic soul can go into bodies of any form, anywhere. If we say this is the supernal pattern, then that supernal pattern has to be universal. So no matter what planet you go to, no matter what race of beings we encounter, guaranteed, if they are a sentient order of life, it is very possible that they may be, in quote, as human as we are. No, not Homo sapien sapien, not of any genetic, physical correlation. They might be those flying purple methane-breathing octopuses who live in the underground oceans on Neptune or Pluto, and they might have the equivalent of what we would call a human soul, or the pattern of the Ten Sefirot within them, in their own construct. When we deal with all forms of life, not only are there the human, but there would also be correlative the Israelite. No, there's not Jews in outer space. Every planet doesn't have its own Jews. So you're not going to be able to go to the Pleiades and catch a minyan for mincha and find a kosher restaurant somewhere out in Alpha Centauri. So let's put the fantasies aside. But you will find elements of consciousness. You will find expressions of what we call Torah there. Because we say in the Midrash that God gazed into the Torah and from there created the universe. Well, then the entire universe is inside the Torah, which means the Torah is inside everything in the universe. So if you're going to Alpha Centauri, if you're going to Proxima, and you're bumping into all those different aliens that are out there who may or may not be humanoid, rest assured in each and every one of their races, they have an expression of Torah, our Torah, as it's expressed to us in our form. They have it in their form. So this form of Sephiroth is a pattern of evolution. Should we call it a pattern of the evolution of divine manifestation? Or maybe it's better to refer to it as a pattern of consciousness, or the revelation and the development of the evolution of consciousness from nothing to something. Now, this then is the expression of the Sephirotic chart. When we refer, let's go down through the 10. The original Sephirah, which brings manifestation out of nothing, is called the crown. The crown, if you remember, sits on top of the head. It's all symbolism. We call it the Ra'awa Ila'ah, the divine will. That divine will is like the seed, the kernel, from which all things are going to come. Rab Chaim would refer to this as the Adam Kadmon, the original primordial, pre-existing force from which everything comes. You can call this the ultimate I. I. The word for I in Hebrew is ani. Take the same three letters, Aleph, Nun, Yud, rearrange them and you get Aleph, Yud, Nun, which is Ein, which is nothing. Someone's asking, could someone have been an alien at another time at a soul level? Or could human souls be born on different planets in different ways? The doctrine of reincarnation teaches us that souls can come and go in all different places in all different ways and means. I would think it's possible. No, our sages do not say you can be reincarnated as an alien in outer space. No, we do not say that. No one's going to say that, so don't even think it. But if you elaborate on the concept as our sages say it, very possible. So if somebody's making a reference here of the fractal nature of God, well, if you remember my book, The Evolution of God, we call it the fractalization of the Sephiroth, or the fractal Sephiroth. The ultimate source, Keter, I. What do I do with that? I. Well, what do you do with I? You have to have a wee bit of insight to know what that is. The first level of revelation. That comes, grows, and that's what we call Chokhmah, wisdom or intuition. We can call that insight. This is called the Father, Abba. Now we're going to get into Partsufim and all that stuff later. This is the level, Chokhmah, the intuition, which we call right brain, and we call this I am. The original revelation is I, but what is it worth unless you can say I am? Remember good old Monsieur Descartes? I think, therefore I am. Do you exist without that? Can you not think and still be? That's Keter. Only when you have an inkling of self-identity and awareness. This is your higher self kind of stuff. Then, and only then, can you say, I am. Okay, cool. What are you? That requires me to sit down and think about it. That requires perception, understanding, the mother of reality. I am what I am. Do you ever hear that? I am what I am? You know that from the Bible, don't you? Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I just described to you the first triad of the Sephiroth called Keter, Chochmah, and Bina. Fancy words, we say Kachab. Now, this is a process of the development of consciousness, where in which it exists in its primordial state, an initial state of insightful revelation, which is then cognized into clarity of perception. I exist. Even before I'm aware that I exist, I exist. And then all of a sudden, I exist. But what am I? Well, I better think about it. I am what I am. That was the revelation and insight that God originally shared to Moses at Sinai, as if to say the form and structure had not yet been created, and that the fluidity of light had not yet collapsed into a singularity until all the choices were made between men and the interactions of human behaviors. That's why, or I should say, that's when Ehyeh becomes Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So, what then, now that you have a construct in your mind of this is what I am, what do you do with it? Where do you go with it? I know who I am. Mazel tov. Well, if this is what I am, I got to put it in action. I got to be it. I got to become what I am. Or I got to do it. Well, you know what? Think about it. Every one of us has numerous thoughts every day popping in our heads like ping pong balls all the time. Boom, 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 boom. Which thoughts do you actually act upon as opposed to those thoughts which just come and go? Answer: those thoughts which you feel motivated by, charged up by. We've now entered the realm, if you will, of emotions. This brings us into the next level of the 6 Sefirot combined. The first triad is Hesed and Gevurah and Tiferet. Hesed, we call it mercy, but we also call it, fluidity. We call it expansion. Think of it as the outgoing expression of things. If you will, the inhale. And to every action that goes out, there must be its equal and opposite reaction, right? Even those laws of physics and thermodynamics are applicable here. Exhale. Things go out, and then they come back in. That coming back in is Gevurah. That is its balance. We call it severity. We call it discipline. It's structure. Fluidity to a point, and then contraction. Expansion, Hesed, contraction, Gevurah. What do you do with the two? They have to find that proper balance in the middle. And that's what we call Tiferet, the heart, harmony. And that point of balance is, we say, the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the source of the Torah, which we endeavor to live and embrace. But once you have that path, now well-defined and balanced, cool, okay, what do I do with it? Well, if you want to benefit from the Torah, you have to embrace it. Now, if you're going to embrace it, right, then it needs to be embraced or imposed upon you. So therefore, the imposition of the order, that's what we call Netzach. Now we're in the lower of the third triad. Netzach is called victory. It's the imposition of the order of Tiferet. Remember, it's going out to the world, bringing all that stuff to the world. Remember the opposite? The opposite is called Hod, glory in gathering. Think of it like this. The husband goes out and works, conquers the world in his way. That's Netzach. And what does he do? Brings home all the bacon, as we say, the money and everything. The wife takes it and builds a wonderful, beautiful home. And the husband and the wife have a balance and a relationship in which you impose the order for the benefit it brings. And that creates harmony, which creates the balance in the universe, which we call Yesod. And Yesod then materializes in a complete structure of wholeness. So, Keter all the way in the top, Malchut all the way in the bottom, and everything here is the process of the materialization from the seed form all the way down to its final tree. And this is the tree of life. This is the order of the Sefirot. I cover this in great detail. I wrote it way back in my Basic Concepts and Terminology book, published as part of our Panu Derech series way back in 1993, 4, 5. And I published it in Walking in the Fire. Go check it there. But a quote that I have from Walking in the Fire, I'm going to read to you now. Again, I just printed it out because it's easier for me. So if you want it, here it is. You can stop the camera, I guess, or video and get to watch it. These are the 10 Sefirot. This is the order. This is what the Baal Shem Tov was teaching about us. God reveals an aspect of himself into creation. This is his will, Keter. An insight, Chokhmah, of his will manifests and is perceived, Bina. This expands, Chesed, outward to a point when it starts to contract, Gevurah. The result is a state of balance, Tiferet, which ordains the order of the universe. This state of balance and order needs to be imposed, Netzach, upon the universe so that the benefit, Hod, of creation can be received. When this occurs, there is harmony, Yesod, in the universe, and everything is complete, Malchut. This is our story. The 10 Sefirot are internal to us. When we do the later forms of Merkava meditation, we've done videos on this from Walking in the Fire, from the writings of the Ben Ish Chai and elsewhere. We're going to review a lot of this stuff in future lessons. We recognize that the 10 Sefirot are internal. We say that the Keter is the crown of the head, Chokhmah is the right brain, the intuitive, the psychic stuff, and Bina is the left brain, rational, intellectual stuff. And then we apply that the Hesed is the right arm, Gevurah is the left arm, Tiferet is the heart, right leg, left leg for Netzach Hod, Yesod is the genitalia, Malchut, the feet. Why are we applying this to our bodies? Because we're trying to help you metaphorically understand that the pattern of the Sefirot, even with the letters in all the proper order, is our pattern. It's us. This was the original attempt of bridging the prophetic experiential to the theoretical. And if you understand the pattern correctly and apply it accordingly, like the Baal Shem Tov taught, then it becomes, as it was meant to be, part of the prophetic system, psychic development system as well. And we use the Sephirotic system as a form of vocabulary and structure so as to give us a semblance of understanding of what we're dealing with. And in the earlier systems, you didn't need that. But in these systems, people can't get to the older systems, so this is what they do. This became the popular people's Kabbalah. And you had people like Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who tried to help us understand the Sefirot, if you will, moralistically, and how we can apply them in our daily lives. And he wrote a wonderful book called The Palm Tree of Deborah, Tomer Devorah, readily available in English and many other languages. It's not really Kabbalah. It's what we call Musar, moralistic ideas, but it's based upon the same concept. And for those who want to make the prophetic Merkava ascent, we use these patterns today because they're just relevant. And this is what enables us to have a structure through which that the mind can use, the soul can use, to help experience the higher domains in a form and structure that we can therefore mentally comprehend. So the knowledge and understanding of the Sephiroth is vital, but it needs to be understood properly as an internal pattern of the growth of psychological and psychic development. And if you think that the Sephiroth is somewhere out there on the other side of the Hubble telescope, and that they're physical and that they're real, what can I say? You just don't get it. And a lot of people look towards the teachings of the Kabbalah and they turn it into like a Talmudic argument. They turn it into a complete philosophical, intellectual, dialectic debate. And they analyze the dickens out of these things. And they are completely off path. They just don't get it. But that system today is so very popular and prominent, especially in certain more ultra-Orthodox circles that have turned Kabbalah into an academic study. You know, there are great people out there who are brilliant academic scholars. They know the history of the Ariel and the stuff, and you know, if I have an academic question, I go to them. They know 10 times better than me. But they've never made a meditation. They've never made an ascent. They have no actual connection to the higher worlds. Everything for them is just disconnected theory. I guess that has its place, but that place is not here in our KosherTorah school. That's not what we teach. So, okay, on that note, we've covered what we need. As I said, I'm going to try to put some of these diagrams I've been showing you in a JPEG form. I'll try to get that up there, probably on our YouTube. No, it won't be here on Facebook, but on YouTube version of this. So if you want really more information of this, go to Walking the Fire. You'll see how I deal and address with the issues. Again, it's been out there 14 years now. Call upon my name where I originally dealt with this, 92, 93, long gone. I have no more copies. Don't even ask. But this is what we got. And we have other courses here that if you want them, they're ready for you. All you got to do is do it. Remember that old song? What was that from the Madagascar cartoon film? I watched it with my kids, right? My son. You got to do it, do it. You got to move it, move it. All right? Still love that song. Great song. But anyway, the point is, you can sit and talk and think about this stuff all you want and read all these books and go, ooh, wow, that's so wow and cool. And you do nothing. You got to do it. Put it into action. You got to recognize the pattern of Sephiroth is not out there looking at you back. It's inside you. And you got to activate it and make it real. And if you do that, you'll get what I mean. All right, let's conclude. Nothing else really to say. So yeah, if you're interested, like I said, go check out the courses that we have on the Kitvei Ari and the other stuff that are correlated to this, the Sephiroth, the older stuff. All of that stuff is on our course page, and see if it's worked for you. Okay, so God be willing, see you all soon. Thank you all for listening. God bless. Shalom.